Welcome everybody to the Trainers Forum. This is presented by HRD Specialized Canine Training. As you most know, now that this is a monthly event that we started for 2020. We are glad to have you with us. More importantly, tonight we're glad to have Jenn Hirakawa. She is a retired U.S. Army Master Sergeant. Um, she lives there in Iowa with her dogs and has Kayla Farms Canine Training. Um, as most of y'all might have gotten one of the reminders that was emailed out. So, thank you. At this point in time, I've known Jenn for about 5 years. We've had the opportunity to teach together a couple of times, and I look forward to being able to teach with her hopefully in October up in Iowa at a joint training that is being offered between HRD Specialized Canine Training and Canine Census. So, with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jenn that has been training and working dogs for since 94 or so. And so, Jenn, the floor is yours.
All right. I just have one question to ask you.
Okay.
Where did you find that picture?
I stole it off your Facebook page.
So there's a funny story behind that picture. The reason that dog's paw is wrapped up is because he was shot by a police officer, and I did the rehab for that dog. Uh, that was after the dog was completely rehabbed and was still recovering from the bullet wound.
Okay. Well, that is a great story. But yes, I stole it off your Facebook page. Considering the last picture you sent me, um, you were actually covered up by the dog leaping up into your arms. So um, thought I'd let everybody see your wonderful smiling face. And that is an amazing story, though, about getting him rehabbed. So
But I just figured you
here is your
were
title.
trying to find a picture with me
Do
actually
what?
smiling in it.
Yeah, well, there is that too
I don't smile much.
with the dog.
Yeah, right. So good evening, everybody. My name is Jennifer Hirakawa. My friends call me Jen. Um, I'm originally from Eva Beach, Hawaii. I joined the United States Army in 1989 as a military police officer, and I retired in 2012, May 31st. As Paul said, as a Master Sergeant in the Military Police Corps. During the tenure of my military service, I had multiple deployments. I worked in multiple positions to include U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Customs for the United States military. But today we're going to talk about the Police Working Dog Program and some specifications of that. So, Paul, whenever you're ready, next slide, please.
Okay.
So what does an Army kennel look like? Well, all military kennels across the board are standardized. As crazy as that sounds, it looks like a Navy, Marine, or Air Force kennel. The reason they all look alike is because they are standardized across the DoD. There are minor changes that are allowed to be made for local unique requirements, such as air conditioning when absolutely necessary, and or in-floor heat in areas that need to be heated. They must meet the same size for all of their runs. Their runs must be in modules of 2 for expansion. They are allowed to house small breed detection dogs, but the exception is that the quartering of small breed detection dogs will only be authorized in their own kenneled area. So as I stated, all kennels must also have kennel area for the dogs that, as I said, must be modularized, a kennel support area. The kennel support facilities include exercise and training areas, and they must be located on the same site as the kennel building to reduce travel time and transportation requirements. The kennel support building must have an area for operational, logistics, and administrative support. It must also have training areas to provide a safe and secure area for both obedience, confidence, and proficiency training for the dogs. The obedience course must be fenced in with 8-foot chain link fence. The fitness area must be able to house 1 dog, and it must be at least 20 by 20. Most of the exercise areas are larger than that, but you will never have 2 dogs exercising in the exercise yard at the same time. And a separate mechanical room, tack room, storage, and or isolation kennels when required must be provided. There are actually diagrams in the AR that tells you exactly what size each room, each building, and each closet must be. Next slide, please. So the multi-purpose room that is support building, it is an interior training room. It is also a room that briefings are done. It is a room where kennel masters and or unit commanders can discuss upcoming training. They can put on seminars. They can conduct sergeant's time. It can also be used as an ad hoc emergency exam room. And it is also a place where when visitors come, that is the one place in the kennels that visitors are allowed to be without an escort. And then you can see here our kennels. The top picture is one of our training rooms at our kennels, and the bottom right picture is a seminar that we had. So the multi-purpose room needs to be functioning for as many different activities as you can possibly have. Next slide. So kennel requirements themselves. The individual kennels must be an enclosed, secure area. It must have a top it must have, in the military, it must have brick sidewalls, and it can have a chain link gate fence. The military kennels also must have a concrete floor with a 1/4 inch slope to ensure that dogs are kept out of any water that may get into them. And they must also have a dog house unless they have indoor-outdoor access. The exercise area for the kennels, as I said, must be a 20-foot by 20-foot enclosure with a standard 8 feet high chain link fence. And at no time ever are their dogs should be left unattended anywhere outside of their kennels or in the exercise area. If they must be left unattended in the exercise area, they are only allowed to wear a leather collar. You may not put a choke chain or a leash on the dog being left in the exercise area. You also have to make sure that there is shade in the exercise area, and you must check on the dog within every 15 minutes to ensure that the dog does not become distressed. The other important thing to note with any military kennel is that it is supposed to be manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If for some reason if for some reason I'm not sure I understand. The kennels must be vacated by all human personnel. They must also have CTT cameras that control that everyone can see. The cameras must go into the kennel area, the outdoor kennel area, the exercise room, and have a 360 perimeter around the building. At all entrances and exits, there will be secure locks that automatically lock as you walk in or walk out. I apologize, someone's texting me and it's blowing up my phone.
No problem.
The other mitigating factors for operational security is pressure pads at gates, at the front entrances of all doors that lead to the kennel area and the administrative and kennel support building. So if somebody steps on the pressure pad, it also sends off a silent alarm. And if you see here in the pictures from our kennel facility, we have 16 cameras in our facility that give a 360 view of the building. It goes into all of our training yards. The cameras also film 24 hours a day, all the dogs in each of the kennels. And you can see that they all have, as you can see with the alerts that we have here on this one, on the ones on the left, it's got night vision so that you can see in there even when it's dark out. The reason for the full-time CTT coverage and or actual humans manning the kennels is for immediate response to any attempted unauthorized intrusion. It gives the whoever's there or the kennel master the capacity to render immediate attention to any dog that becomes physically distressed. It is the ability to get a dog that has become physically distressed immediately to veterinary. It also allows you to continuously ensure that your dogs have water and care. Even with an automatic watering system, you have to ensure that the dog's water is clean at all times. You know how our dogs get thirsty, they stick their muzzles into their bucket of water and they come up and now the water's discolored. In a military kennel, that water has to be dumped immediately and refreshed. So those are the main kennel requirements for a military kennel. And then you can see with some pictures of our training center, our kennels and our our grooming. In the all military police canine handlers have to groom their own dog. In the top left picture, some of my trainers are grooming a particular dog because she's a Leonberger, and every time she gets groomed every day, she can completely make a new dog with her hair. Got some pictures of some of our kennels up there. The middle picture on the left-hand side, though we were in the middle of a tornado warning, so all of those crates and people that you see with dogs in crates, it's because they're in the center of the building in the basement with the dogs as the tornado warning issue was going off. As like all other military kennels, we have a full kitchen with washer, dryer, dog grooming station, and a break room for employees and trainers to eat. The pictures of the puppies playing, that is in the upstairs training area. The dogs running around out back, that is, we have 20 acres where the dogs can exercise. We have multiple kennel technicians that take the dogs out to the back pastures and ensure that they run. And some of these dogs have been raised together, so they get to play together. No, Ellen, we do not have those crates set up all the time in the basement. That room is our scent room. It is the interior room in the basement. So if the event of a tornado warning, the first thing that we do is get those. They're stored down there right next to that room. Those crates are set up. Every dog is moved from their indoor-outdoor runs. Each of our runs indoor is 5 feet by 6 feet, and each of the outdoor runs is 5 feet by 10 feet. And we get those dogs out of those runs and get them into the crates. So to answer your question, they're not kept set up. Thank you. And you can just see different pictures of dogs in training or in seminars. As you see the large picture, that was one of the canine census seminars on train final response that we had here. And then there's some just training pictures for your enjoyment. Next slide, please. All right, so what did I learn while I was in the military? Oh, geez. When we talk about military police dogs and training, the military has a very standardized way of training, and you can go through the regulations. Army Regulation 190-13 is the Army Physical Security Program. AR 190-5 is motor vehicle traffic and traffic supervision. Army Regulation 190-12 is the Army military dog program, and DAPAM 190-12 is the military working dog program, which is a DAPAM is a pamphlet. It's a breakout of what's in the AR, which is Army regulation, and just kind of goes into more specific detail on what you should be doing, how you should be doing it, and what will make you successful and what can get you in trouble. If you've kind of gotten the theme with this, any Army regulation that starts with 190 has to deal with military police. And the reason AR 190-5, which is motor vehicle traffic supervision, it is in part of the military police dog program is because as a military police canine team, you will help perform motor vehicle stops and vehicle searches. AR 190-13, which is the Army Physical Security Program, is heavily involved in the Army Dog Program because you, as a canine team, will work in areas that have security clearances, that you need security clearances to be in, and in areas that need to be locked down for one reason or another. And of course, then we also talk about the security of the kennels and the kennel support buildings. So the one thing that I learned in the Army is there's always a rule. If you can't figure it out, someone can show you where to find it. You may not always know where it's at, but you can find it. So going into talking about proficiency training, military police dog teams need continual proficiency training to maintain their skills. In a normal day-to-day operation, when you're on patrol and your dog's in your vehicle and you're doing this and you're doing that and you're pulling people over, or you're on a walking patrol somewhere, or you're using the dog to clear buildings and or walk around at night to, I don't want to use the word intimidate, but a show of strength that you and the dog are clearing the officers club because it's closed. And since the officers club is haunted, you take your dog with you around the backside of the building so that you don't have to go by yourself. I'm just saying. But anyway, with that being said, day-to-day operations do not allow you to practice all the skills that your dog team is trained to do. And one thing that is absolutely in just about every other paragraph, when it doesn't matter if it's talking about proficiency training or principles of training or your training cycles or your training of narcotics detection dogs or explosive detection dogs or tracking dogs or landmine detection dogs, over and over and over in the Army regulation and the Army pamphlet, it talks about rewarding and reinforcing your dog for performing their task. For some people, I know that's a shocker. But since 1993, the Army has, correction, I apologize. Since 2013, the Army has adamantly gone to rewarding your dog for performing their task. The Army talks about in principles of training, contingencies of reinforcement, as your dog will only be reinforced when they perform the task correctly. There's no magic formula or single method for training an MWD. Each dog has unique characteristics and traits, and their training must be adapted so that consistently a correct response is achieved. The basic principles of dog training is that the dog is taught to associate a pleasant, rewarding event with the correct performance of the task. And you can even throw in required task if that wasn't a given. The association is brought about in training by applying your knowledge, your patience with the dog, repetition of the task, praise, reward, and if a correction is needed, correction. No, to answer that question, Ellen, I do not. We do train blank areas. We do reward our dogs for not false alerting in a blank area. As long as we as handlers knew that there was absolutely no residue and no possibility that there could have been something in that area for that dog to have missed, if that makes sense to you. Okay, so back to proficiency training. Training should be tailored to emphasize each dog or their handler's weakness. For example, if a dog team is weak on building searches, several training exercises should require that team to search a building, and it should never be the same building over and over. When training the dog, each handler education must be applied to all the knowledge he or she gains or has gained while at school, while learning from the kennel master and or senior trainers and or subject matter experts in the field. So with that being said, I want to make it clear that the Army is constantly going out and looking to subject matter experts in the field outside of the military system and saying, hey, you are good at what you do. We like what you do. We would like for you to come and train with us or work with us. One of the principles of training is that praise is considered the most important reinforcer. That comes directly out of the Army regulation, that praise is the most important reinforcer. Praise must be given in the precise moment the dog makes the desired and or correct response. Praise encourages the dog to perform the task correctly. Praising the dog too early or too late may only confuse the dog about the nature of the task the handler is trying to train the dog to do. Now let me clarify. Yes, Ellen, that is correct. Usually what it is not that the civilian goes and works with the military, but handlers are sent to the civilian school and or class or seminar. Let me state that a reward, being a food, a ball, or a favorite play object that the dog recognizes as success for the proper completion of a task and or, as we call it, contingency for reinforcement, is also what they're talking about when they're talking about praise. So when we say praise, or at least when I say praise somebody, people may take it as, go say, oh, good boy, you're a good boy, yeah, good job. But that's not what it means when it's talked about in the AR. When they're talking about praise, it's a lot of high-pitched, it makes you uncomfortable type noises, and you're also reinforcing and rewarding the dog at the same time with their toy and or food, whatever the most motivating thing in your tool bag is for that dog to continue wanting to perform that task correctly over and over. One of the principles of training when it comes to reward reinforcement is that the reward that the dog uses for contingency of reinforcement is not a reward and or a toy that the dog gets to play with any other time. So if your dog happens to like the fire hose tug after they've successfully completed what you've asked them to complete, and they get to tug the firehouse tug, and that makes them the most happy, that firehouse tug should not be available for them anytime they want. It should be put away, and it's only used as a contingency for reinforcement. Talking about rewarding your dog and praising your dog for successfully completing their task, the reward must be, the reward must be given immediately. Nowhere in the regulation does it say that the dog must be rewarded at source. It simply says that the reward must be given as soon as the dog has completed the task. The question that was asked was, do we have a policy for rewarding a negative search? I apologize for not reading it to you. For those of you on Facebook, I forget that you can't see the questions on Zoom. So who decides what the trained final response will be for a canine coming into and being paired up with a team? The interesting part of that is it happens at the schoolhouse. While they're at Lackland, while they're puppies, while they're going through the program, it is the trainers in the puppy and intermediate, when they come back from their fosters and they begin their military police training, they are the ones who decide what the trained final response is going to be. So when you are paired up with your first dog at your duty station, you will be given a 6-month timeline for you and that dog to mesh and blend and become a unit before you have to certify your dog in the tasks that your dog is supposed to be working on. If you fail the first certification, you get one more certification attempt. If you fail the second certification attempt, the dog will be given to a senior handler. They will attempt to certify that dog in that field. If the dog certifies, you will be dropped out of the canine program as a handler that cannot do their job. I don't have any other nicer way to say it other than bluntly, just like that. If the dog can pass the test but cannot pass the test with you, or the certification but cannot pass the certification with you, you will be the one removed from the program. If the dog cannot pass the certification with another handler, more senior handler and or trainer, the Army has the option to send the dog back to retraining and or wash the dog from the program. A question, is it usually the dog or the job they are to do for the TFR? As far as who determines what the TFR is at the schoolhouse, I would like to say that they always ask for the dog to do what it would normally do in a stressful situation, but I can't say that for sure. What I will tell you is that the schoolhouse had, since 2013, all train final responses will be passive train final responses, and the DoD considers barking a passive train final response. So either the dog will sit or bark. Some dogs do lay down, but in the regulation, it states that it will be a passive train final response. Another principle of training is that element of training that says you must proof your dog. When we talk about proofing our dog, we're talking about training in various areas with different obstructions, with different objects, with different amounts of source. And your dog must be successful in those trainings to be considered proofed. So you go to the theater today, and tomorrow we might go over to one of the MP companies to train there, and then we might go to the PX. For all train environments, source will be added to the environment, whether that be a human, whether that be a explosive, whether that may be a narcotic. It will always be different amounts. It will always be recorded, the amount, the temperature, all the things that you can think of that you put in your training files when you're working your own dog. Military does the same thing. But if your dog can only work on your farm, in your house, or your property, or down the street where you always train, then your dog's not proof to be certified out in public. So one of the things that we talk a lot about in the military is a training cycle. The general rule of thumb for each dog is that at least 4 hours of proficiency training each week is necessary to maintain minimum standards for that dog. So 4 hours minimum standards. And that's for all tasks that that dog is supposed to be proficient on. And this is, of course, after a dog has certified. Because as a new handler and their canine are working or learning each other, they're working, that's all they're doing is learning and working together and building that bond. But once the dog is certified, it is a minimum of 4 hours each week in all tasks. The ability for your dog to maintain proficiency on each separate task will also vary on the nature and complexity of each task. Each of the kennel masters and their training NCOs put together a timeline and schedule for each officer or handler to work on those training tasks, and from everything from obedience to patrol work to detection work. And they must understand the cycle, each individual's dog's training cycle to maintain that proficiency. And what do I mean by that is that what they'll do is they'll take one task or two tasks and they'll only train 4 hours a week on those tasks. They'll see if the dog proficiency with that task stays the same, it goes up, it goes down. If it stays the same, they'll move to ensuring that they have 5 hours of work on that task. If the proficiency goes up, they realize that To maintain a steady proficiency, they need maybe 5 hours on that task. That is called a training cycle. How long can your dog miss training that particular task for a particular time period before your dog loses proficiency in that task? So training cycle is best talked about as frequency of repetition of that task. One of the other points that I should point out is that when we use public buildings for training exercises, one of the things that is specifically addressed in the regulation is that the training should happen as soon as the facility has been closed, so that lingering human scent provides a realistic work or training environment for the dog. Unless, of course, you're doing explosive detection work and you're putting explosive residue in the building, because you're not going to put the explosive residue in the building while everybody's still at work, so that the dog can start training immediately. So how do we conduct proficiency training? One of the key pieces I want to key on here is that stereotyped exercises lead to stereotypical results, and then they have little training value. One of the things that I like to say all the time, probably ad nauseum, is train as you fight. That is something that the Army drilled into me from day one. It didn't matter if I was a patrol supervisor, if I was in a division LMP company on the combat side of the house, if I was in a law enforcement MP company. Train as you fight. Always set your training up as realistically as you can possibly make it, so that it is as real as it can possibly be for you and the dog. Because if you're just going out there and doing the same thing all the time, every time, you're going to get the same results all the time, every time. And if you're only training for the certification, you're not really a proficient team. Because certifications are just that. They're a piece of paper that says that this dog has met minimum standards. We all know, at least on the military side, we all know exactly what it entails for our dog to recertify. We have months or weeks in advance notice that we're getting ready to recertify, and we can work on just the things that make sure we do recertify. But that's not what we should be doing. We should be training for those scenarios that we're going to see in the field for real. Your dog and you should be training for your worst day ever. If you and your dog are successful on your worst day ever, your dog is proficient, and you are proficient, and you are a team. All training should be emphasized and tailored for each handler and dog's individual weakness. Said that earlier. I can't stress that enough. Don't train at what you're good at over and over and over and over. Train for what your weakest task is and become more proficient with that, because each time you work on what you're weak at, you'll get better at that, and then you'll have to find something else you're weaker at, and you'll get better at that. And that is what leads to proficiency training. Remember to never allow training and stereotypes. And this is all out of a U.S. Army manual for the military working dog program. When I came out of the military and I started meeting more and more of the civilian handlers that I have much respect for. I had a lot of questions about how heavy-handed and hard the military was on their dogs. One of the great conversations that Paul and I have had recently was that the heavy-handedness of the military and the taskings and the overtime of the MWDs was really starting to go away in 93, 94 timeframe. The military as a whole, the DoD dog program as a whole started looking to subject matter experts in the civilian world and actually brought in Dr. Karen Overall at a point to run the PTSD program for the MWDs. For those of you that don't know who Dr. Karen Overall is she is a world-renowned veterinary behavioralist specializing in canine behavior. But as she is a board-certified veterinary behavioralist. And the military has worked with her multiple times over the years at Lackland Air Force Base in helping them develop their puppy program and helping them transition to actually loving and relying on the team instead of the dog just being a tool for the mission. So with Detector dog training and proficiency, just to hit a few bullet points that are in the AR is well conducted training must be documented. They're both critical to maintaining the team certification and to establishment of probable cause for a search based upon a detector's dog's number of correct responses. I could get into a whole bunch of training scenarios and for you, but I'm going to move on to the next slide. Just remember that no matter what you're doing with your dog, always warm your dog up prior to starting it. Next slide, please, Paul.
I think that one quick question before we go to the next slide. In warming your dog up, what would that look like? What, can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. When you get your dog out of the vehicle, play with your dog. Let them stretch their legs. Let them do a quick little jog with them up and down, 10 feet, 20 feet from your car back to your 20 feet away from your car, back to your car. Let them relieve themselves. Let them stretch out on the grass for a second and just get out of that whole, I've been in my kennel in the car for the last 3 hours type thing. The other part of warming your dog up that we as HRD handlers cannot do in a real live situation is that with narcotics and explosive detection dogs, we will put them on and we will throw an odor out into the grass and have the dog alert on that odor so we know that they're fully in the game before we move them into whatever situation we have to move them into. And as you know, if we're being called for a real call out, we can't take a piece of HRD or a piece of HR and throw it out in the grass and have the dog find it, pack it back up in our car, and then go on to the search because we don't bring HR to real searches with us.
Correct.
At least I don't.
And I thought that's where you were headed with it, but yeah, we had gotten a couple of questions from Facebook about explaining or unpacking that
Yeah, I apologize. I'm not.
I'll be happy.
Every time I try to go over and look at the Facebook side, my screen gets big. So I'm just staying on the Zoom side because Zoom is on full screen for me right now. So if you want to stop
Good
me with
deal.
Facebook questions, I'll stop.
No problem. Thank you.
And if anybody wants any of this in writing, like the time, the variation of time, day and night that you should train, the type of distraction material that should be placed in. Although I'll tell you, one of the best distraction material that fouled me up, and I'm not even talking about when I was in the military, and I got this from Craig. Because of course he sent a challenge out, and I took my dog into a room full of popcorn on the floor to see if he could work through a small tin of HR and whether or not he'd leave the popcorn alone. It was a training problem that we had to work through. He decided he liked the popcorn the first time it came out. So distractions are great. Catfish bait is also a great distraction if you're talking about an HR dog. But if anybody wants any of this in writing, feel free to reach out and I'll get it for you. I'll send you the list. So this form here is DA Form 2807. It is the military police dog training and utilization record. Now, with this form, you can see that there are 31 days in a month, how many hours you worked your dog, depending on what your dog is. If you have a dual purpose dog, a single purpose dog, or even a, as Paul and I were talking, we don't have any more triple purpose dogs left in the system that I know of. But all of that, this is your training record. This is where you record everything, the hours that you did every day, what you did. And I believe, yeah, this is the single form. And so it just really depends on what you're working on each day. I'll give you a moment to peruse that form. And you can see some of the pictures off to the side. The one top, all the pictures on the left are all just training pictures. The top two pictures on the right are training pictures, and the very bottom picture on the right was an actual call out that our team went to. So whenever you're ready, Paul, you can flip slides. This is DA Form 3992, and this is your Detector dog utilization record and training record. I'll let everybody take a look at that for a minute or so. Yes, one of the questions from Zoom is, can those be modified for HRD? Absolutely. I've actually taken a modified version of this record right here and made it my HRD dog's training record. What I have in there that's not on this form is temperature, weather, those items that aren't on this. But yes, absolutely, this can be modified. And whenever you're ready, Paul, next slide.
Also, because these forms are publicly available, because I've actually got copies of these forms, we can post that onto Facebook for our participants that we're asking about. getting those. We can post them as a PDF in the trainer's form.
Absolutely. And these are both of the forms that I have here are fillable PDFs.
Okay, moving forward.
So the military working dog program is at Joint Base San Antonio Lackland. It is now Joint Base San Antonio Lackland. That is new since all the bases merged together. It's the Army base and the Air Force base combined. You see here just some of the in the middle picture is actually the current training staff at Joint Base Lackland, and then just some training stuff. And of course, you can't have a military police program without a picture of a dog next to a police car.
Of course not.
Just can't do it. And of course, it's got to be a pointy ear because I love my floppy ears. So, if you'd like, Paul, at this time, I put together just a quick compilation. It was a 14-minute video from Joint Base Lackland, from the RTI, which is the regimental training group here that is the work facilitators from 341st. They had a civilian come in that wanted to join the Army to be a 31 kilo, which is the military police canine handler. And so they kind of ran him through the paces. But I edited it down to just 2 minutes or so. There are parts where I took the sound out because the video, you didn't need to hear the sound. So anyway, if you could play that, Paul. Paul, I can't see it. I don't know if it's playing in the background. I hear it, but I can't see it.
Okay. Hold on. How's that?
There we go. So I know that we can't hear it, but one of the things that I wanted to touch base on is, so it is playing really broken, but if you can see this ammo can that the handler is holding, that is his dog for the day as he's learning to work obedience with a dog. He doesn't actually get a dog, he gets an ammo can attached to a leash. And he must proficiently praise and play with that ammo can before he's actually given a leash dog. The pictures here with the unit on a brigade march. So this is at Fort Hood, Texas. The entire brigade runs for a brigade run. That includes the canine handlers and their canines. They're not exempt from that. This training exercise where the dog is unloading off the Blackhawk. This dog is going to go off leash because it is dual purposed. It is an explosive detection and mine detection dog. So it'll be off leash for the mine detection part because we don't keep a dog leashed when they're looking for landmines on the side of the road. And then when they go to enter the building and look for explosives and or do patrol work, it will be released back up. And you can see here the handler drops the leash to allow the dog to pursue the aggressor or agitator. And the dog found the cache of weapons and ammunition. And these are some of the puppies in the training program. These individuals with the spite sleeve, they are working the 11-month to 2-year-old dogs in patrol work. And that patrol dog there, his name is Paco. And that is his handler. They've had multiple deployments to Afghanistan together. And that dog has saved her life quite a few times. And one of the best things that I heard from her was that she trusts her dog's nose because her dog's nose has kept her alive.
Okay, we jumped back over.
And then the next slide, please. So, military police dogs that are in the program that are bred at Lackland. From birth to 8 weeks old, they are in the kennels at Lackland, and the puppy care team raises them and puts them on all types of different substrates and makes lots of loud noises and kind of does as much environmental socialization as they can until the puppies go to their foster homes. If you live anywhere near San Antonio, Texas, within a 2-hour drive, you can always apply to be a foster dog for the MWD, a foster human for the MWD dogs. It is a 5-month commitment. You will take the dog and you just get to let the dog be a dog for 5 months. At 7 months old, they come back into the kennel system at Lackland. They're evaluated for suitability of MWD work, and they're started through the program. Next slide, please. And again, the references that I used today was AR 190-12, Military Police Working Dogs, DAPAM 190-12, Military Police Working Dogs Program, the Department of the Army Form 3992, which is the Narcotics Detector, Dog Training and Utilization Record, and DA Form 2807, Military Working Dog Training and Utilization Record. And there's just 2 pictures of me. Look, see, Paul, I'm smiling in those also. I do smile once in a while.
I know.
And then there's a picture of my big baby moose. And that was taken over at Canine Census property at our last training seminar that we had. So does anybody have any questions?
Well, in the meantime, while we're waiting for people to type in questions and so forth, there was a question on whether or not you tatted moose.
Ellen, I'm scared to answer. We'll talk offline. I have no idea what she meant by it, so I want to
But
ask her offline.
no, I can understand that. There are, I think this was a great amount of information covered in here, and there a lot of it that you presented are things that we can think about if we have a team or if we have multiple dogs. But you also made a great point about training more rigorously besides just managing or maintaining the status quo. And I think that's a wonderful thing that we always need to be reminded is train for the fight, as you said.
I can't stress it enough. I think a story that I have when I first started working with Robin, and hopefully she's not on here so she doesn't kill me later, is that we were at a training scenario, and we were at a training seminar here, and she didn't know me very well, and I didn't know her very well, and we were kind of doing that whole we don't know each other, but we're listening to each other, and we like what each other's saying, and we have mutual respect for each other. So there was the next day's class, and she's like, well, why don't you go set up the environment for tomorrow? So I went and got a backhoe and started backhoe and was going to bury so hi Robin. I started digging source down with the backhoe and then smearing the source on the blades of the backhoe. And she's like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. I'm like, why not? In the real world, they might find the backhoe, they might find the blades. They indicate that there's odor on the blades, and they look over there, and there's a big hole that you can just see was recently dug up with the backhoe. You can make the inference. She's like, no, that's not how we do this. I'm like, okay. So Robin and I have had many conversations about train as you fight, and we're there. I mean, now we do buried problems all the time, and we do realistic scenarios where, like, I'm going to her house on Tuesday, and she's got stuff already set up today that I got to go find on Tuesday somewhere on her 700 acres. It's realistic. I don't have a clue where they're going to be. And I'm just going to go out there sometime on Tuesday and go find it.
Nice. Okay, so we've got a question in from Facebook. When you mention 4 hours per task is that nose time, and they follow that up, and this is from Jenn. You mentioned that for training we should aim at 4 hours per task. For example, if you're doing the land HR, is that 4 hours of active searching? Assume you can break that up into smaller chunks of time per week.
So
Is that nose time?
No, actually, that's not how it's broken up. And Jen, just to remind you, 4 hours is per week is minimum maintenance. So you should always aim for more than 4 hours. And you have to remember, there are how many tasks involved with teaching your dog to search, find, give TFR. You've got at least the hunt, you've got nose time, you've got latency issues at the TFR maybe, so you got speed drills. So all of those can be broken into individual simple one. Take that whole task backwards, chain it, break it in half, cut it up, and go, okay, I need to work on my routine to launch my dog so that my dog knows it's working. I need to remove some of the latency in my dog's TFR. What do I do there? Should I do speed drills? I need to know my dog is proficient in odor. How many different odors, at what size and sampling do I put out during that week to ensure that my dog can meet the standard? 4 hours again is minimum standard. Now it's one of the things that Robin and I had many discussions, and Greg and Brad and I had many discussions on, was the difference between HR and cocaine or marijuana. Now that we're not training police narcotics dogs to alert on marijuana anymore, but back in the day we did. Marijuana is going to smell like marijuana is going to smell like marijuana. Whether you have 5 pounds of marijuana or 25 kilos of marijuana, you're just going to have a bigger scent pool. Marijuana does not decompose like a decomposing human does. So when you're talking about the difference in detection work for a narcotics dog, an explosive dog, and a HRD dog, you've got much more source that you need to be able to ensure your dog is proficient. Bone, blood.
If I could
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
if I could jump in here, one of the things to think about is with our narcotics canines. Yes, when you get away from marijuana, there can be different formulations, so to speak, of how those are combined. But once it's combined, it's relatively stable.
Yes.
Whereas with human decomposition, we are having to train flexibility into our dogs, not only in the size or quantity, but from the freshest to the oldest. Um, and,
Yes.
and with that, uh, to get that robust flexibility in there, um, we've got to have a lot of nose time. Just in looking at, as you were commenting about the bone and blood and then tissue and so forth, uh, to build that robustness in there, that means we've got to have um, probably significantly more nose time to truly maintain that flexibility than some of the other disciplines.
Yeah, and you've got
One of
to
the,
have fresh to as old as you can possibly have, and everything in between.
and you got to add in the, robustness of being able to detail a car, detail a building, and go out and work umpteen acres.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know, like Craig Schultz and I have talked about using, looking at that 16 hours plus a month, is that, yes, that's the minimum that's recommended. But if we want to break it down for nose time, well, we got to have at least over half of those hours truly be dedicated to nose working. Whereas everything else is, like you said, the obedience, the agility, the conditioning, the environmental awareness, and so forth. So, yeah, 16 hours or the 4 hours, uh, those are just minimums. Those are guidelines to kind of, we want to get you there.
Absolutely. Thank you for rewording that for me and filling in those blanks.
Sorry,
No,
I
it's good.
wasn't trying to. I wasn't trying to steal your thunder. Um,
No, absolutely not. I
but that's
appreciate
part of the reason why we enjoy teaching.
it. Right. So yeah, we try. To, it's one of the reasons I like teaching with you all, because we try to set up all of our seminars and scenarios as real world as possible. Train as you fight is a must, and again, train for your worst day.
Very much so. A
Any
couple
other?
of questions from Zoom. What is the ratio of floppy-eared dogs versus pointy-eared dogs and I guess that's in regards to the military working dog program.
Well,
Uh,
are you guys
Carmen
in the
has some
MWD
own
program?
bias because she has floppy ears.
There, I don't know. My answer to you is that to that question is I don't know. But what I will tell you is almost all of the dogs that are doing explosive detection now um, are floppy ears. And I'm talking about the dogs that are deploying overseas that don't have patrol as a dual MOS are floppy ears. Uh, you can always tell who was bred at Lackland because their name. So say their name was Zeus, their name would be ZZUES. Yes, they absolutely. Ellen asked, do they use pointy ears to do bite work? They do use pointy ears to do the bite work, but floppy ear dogs that do patrol work also. So there I don't have an answer what the actual ratio is, but you do see a lot of floppy ears in the MWD program, and they're also it's not just labs and Mals and German Shepherds and Dutchies anymore. They've got Springer Spaniels. They've got small breed dogs. Um, they branch out with other dogs to see how they're in a confrontational environment, so that when they're in the public setting and they're working at large forums where there's people present. For example, when I was stationed at Fort Carson, we had to secure the Air Force Academy Stadium for the presidential address during the graduation of the Air Force Academy. Uh, all the dogs that were there that were walking up and down the stands were all floppy ears. All the dogs that were at the entrances were all pointy ears. I'm sure somebody did that on purpose now that I think about it, but it is what it is. The idea of using military working dogs to intimidate the general public is not what it once was.
Very good. Any other questions? I thank everybody that has submitted questions, and I greatly appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us, Jenn. I look forward to working with you in October if COVID doesn't shut all of that down as well. Hopefully, this incipient disease will go on. Um, but in the meantime, one last question. Wondering how hard it is to teach your dog to climb a ladder.
Well, I would say that my answer to that, and Paul, feel free to chime in on that. It depends on the dog and how you try to teach it. The way I was taught to teach a dog to climb a ladder was to put the ladder on the ground and let the dog walk on it first, and then move it to 2 inches off the ground with very wide planks. So the dog was basically walking on a 2x4 ladder, and then slowly minimize the size of the rails as you then, once the dog is comfortable walking on a flat surface 2 inches off the ground, then you raise it up a little bit more and you keep raising it, and then you start putting your angles in it. Do you have anything different for that, Paul?
That's really the way I was taught. But I will say, some dogs just are naturally.
Did we lose Paul? I think what he was going to say is some dogs are just naturally like to climb ladders. Like you see so many videos of certain breeds of dogs that have a propensity for ladders and high things. Well, Paul is still here somewhere, but I think we're closing down. So in the event that we don't get him back auditorily, thank you all for listening. I see a lot of faces that I recognize, or at least a lot of names for faces that I recognize. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact either myself, Paul, or any of the HRD Specialized Canine Training team or the Canine Census team. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Sorry about that,
Oh, there you
everybody.
are.
I was knocked off because I was knocked off due to a power surge. And so, what I was saying was that some dogs are naturally curious about climbing. And my grandfather had a beagle something or another cross, and a little bit short dog, fat as a sausage. But when he was younger, they looked up one day, and they were up on the replacing the roof, and he had climbed the ladder, and he was up there on the roof with them. So some dogs are just naturally curious, and they take to it quicker than others.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But I did want to take a moment. Close this. And again, thank you for your time this evening. But Also, next month we're going to have Elizabeth Lapointe from Canine Search Initiative joining us, and she will be speaking with us about leash handling skills and how important, how critical those truly are in working our dogs. So that is our guest coming up in July. I would invite everyone to go out and visit the shop there at HRD Specialized Canine right now. Use coupon code Independence15 for 15% off of anything in the shop. Take a moment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. This presentation will eventually make it on there. Probably will be in the next week or so. And if you have any questions, please send me an email. Please visit the website for webinars, remote coaching, and classes. Again, I thank you, Jen, and thank you, everybody that tuned in tonight. Please stay safe and don't lick anything. It's not good for your health right now. Thank you all. Bye-bye.